Helena, your video work, Can You Hear Me, shows you moving silently in front of a historic photograph. Why that combination of photography and dance on film, and how does the title come into play?
I made this work between 2018 and 2019. It was the time I was finishing my degree to start studying art at a technical university, where we learned like very technical media like painting, drawing, and sculpture. But I was that rebellious student who wanted to delve into performance and video art. And this was one of my submissions for my final exams. But it was also a time where I was digging deeper into my personal history and my heritage, which is Angolan. And it was a time of frustration. I was very frustrated because my life was decided, or the outcome of my life and my family's life was decided by leaders who lived a much better life than most Angolans between 1975 and like the 2000s when the war ended, and even now. So I was really angry. And in this video work, it's a shadow work. It's my shadow reflected on this still photograph, attempting to speak to these leaders, but also to speak to history, maybe attempting to have a change, but knowing that they will not, they cannot hear me physically because it's a photo. Um, and like with many people who might have disagreed with the war or felt the outcomes or felt the war, really, they were never heard. And that was what I tried to portray in this video.
As you said, your work addresses the relationship between very personal but also collective memories. To what extent or how do you see your art preserving or transforming our look back at history?
Um, we're in 2025 and it's very precarious times. And I don't think when I started making the work I did, I was doing it as an exercise to understand myself and to dig into this history that in South Africa is not known, and also globally. And it was affected by global politics and history, like the Cold War. Um, as much as it was very real in Germany, it was more real in Southern Africa, where everyone was involved in Angola and weapons were tested and lines were drawn who's communist and who's not, and who's an ally and not. Um, and it was a very difficult time for many people in Southern Africa. Apartheid was rife at the time. Um, and then we fast forward to where we are today with the rise of fascism in Europe and or in the West, um, the separation, the violence that continues to rise. Um, for many Africans, I think we've seen this over and over again because of colonialism and post colonialism or neo colonialism. And now the West and everyone in the West is affected by it. So, how do we not continue to learn? How do we choose as a society and humanity to ignore what has happened and allow it to happen again and again and again? So, yeah.
You call yourself primarily a storyteller, working between stories and silences, you say. Tell us a bit about that tension or how that comes together for you.
Um, I, I don't know. I think besides storyteller, a lot of the times I keep the stories of my community. I've conducted many interviews, um, and some where it was hard to for me to process the information and the stories that were given to me and entrusted with me. And that's why I found mechanisms like Can You See Me to retell these stories. Um, some of the stories are very traumatic, even for me, and rewriting it or using fictional characters or fairy tales or even eliminating the voice is much stronger than retelling the violence, re-traumatizing the people, re-traumatizing myself and the audience. I think storytelling and writing is a good mechanism to get people to invite people to understand, and to for them to also be open to understanding the story and the history. And I think in terms of silence, the silence always continues, and we are also in a time where silencing keeps happening, um, globally. I think thinking about journalists, where real journalism is dying because most newspapers have been bought up, and now we're in a time where there's cuts, budget cuts to for artists, uh, in Germany in particular, but globally. And the silent, I think more it's more important now for us to find mechanisms to talk and to amplify that silence.
Mm. Are there moments, I'm thinking about your source material, when you consciously work with a gap or an absence in an archive, and that could be the oral archive of stories that you've mentioned or photographic archives? What interests you in what's not there yet?
It's what's not there yet. It's what could be filled in between. I think art and storytelling allows me to feel and imagine, possibilities, possibilities of both the trauma, but also maybe finding a solution. And sometimes finding the solution can be in the silence. Um, I I've also taken upon myself to create an archive of my community, and not just look back, because most of the photographs that I've used were taken by someone else, mostly white men, and it's owned by them. And sometimes I borrow. I don't know. I feel I have a right to it, and I reuse it in my work and rethink about the history. Um, but now I also document events like weddings and funerals, and for me it's a way to kind of to archive memory, language, the stories that is shared in these events. um I think an archive shouldn't just be put somewhere in a room that is only accessed by academics or someone who might be interested. um I also think an archive is a living thing. It's a current happening, constantly happening thing. And for me, the archive became my community members, like the aunts and uncles in the community became the archive. And maybe now I think of myself as an archive. I think right now is we are making an archive. We are remembering a moment and sharing a story.
Hmm.
Yeah.